Good evening, dear travellers. Welcome back to Snug as a Bug. Tonight we're setting sail into the enchanting world of Greek mythology. Tonight's journey begins with the Journey of Perseus, a tale of bravery, destiny, and gods, where a young hero sets out to change his fate. We will then glide into the Fall of Icarus, an unforgettable story of ambition and freedom that reaches for the sky before finally joining the Myth of Atalanta, a legend of strength, speed, and a young woman's fierce independence. With each story, let go of the day's worries and immerse yourself in the world of heroes, gods, and ancient wonders. Let the gentle sound of my voice carry you as the myths guide you into the deepest realms of calm. Before we embark on this mythic journey, let's take a moment to fully relax and unwind. Let your imagination take you to a distant time, an ancient era where the world was filled with gods and heroes, where the line between myth and reality blurred, and the land itself seemed to hum with magic and wonder. As you stand in the clearing, you hear the gentle murmur of voices, ancient voices telling the tales of Perseus, Icarus, and Atalanta. The voices are soft and melodic, blending with the sounds of the night, and you feel yourself being drawn into the stories as though the very fabric of time is unraveling to reveal the past. The stars above seem to shine brighter, their light illuminating the stone circle, and you feel a gentle warmth envelop you. The journey is about to begin. You are ready to follow Perseus on his quest, to soar with Icarus, and to race beside Atalanta. The night is filled with promise, and the world around you seems to hum with magic and possibility. The journey begins now as you step into the world of heroes and legends, letting the stories guide you to a place of peace, wonder, and deep, restful sleep. The Journey of Perseus. Chapter 1. The Prophecy of Acrisius. Long ago, in the ancient city of Argos, King Acrisius brooded in his opulent palace. His face was lined with the wrinkles of worry, his heart heavy with fear. He had sought the oracle of Delphi, hoping to hear of a prosperous future, but instead he received a prophecy that haunted him day and night. The oracle's words were clear. King Acrisius, you will meet your end at the hands of your grandson. The prophecy echoed in his ears, a chilling warning of betrayal from his own blood. In his desperation, Acrisius locked his only daughter, Danae, away in a bronze chamber deep beneath the palace. There, in her shimmering prison, Danae spent her days in solitude, her only companions the faint glimmer of sunlight that filtered through a small opening and the gentle whispers of the breeze. Acrisius believed that by imprisoning Danae he could avoid his fate, but the gods had other plans. One day, a beam of golden light filled Danae's chamber, more brilliant and warm than any sunlight she had ever seen. It was Zeus, the king of the gods, who had taken notice of her beauty and her sorrow. "Who are you?" Danae whispered, shielding her eyes from the radiance. "Fear not, Danae," a deep voice replied. "I am Zeus, and I have come to bring you comfort." From that golden light, Danae bore a son whom she named Perseus. The infant's cries echoed through the bronze chamber, a defiant sound that signaled the beginning of a great journey. When Acrisius discovered the child, his fear turned to rage. "A child!" Acrisius shouted, his voice trembling with anger. "How could this happen?" Unable to bring himself to kill his own flesh and blood, Acrisius devised another plan. He placed Danae and Perseus in a wooden chest and cast them out to sea, leaving their fate to the mercy of the waves. "Mother," Danae whispered, holding Perseus close. "We must trust the gods to protect us." Chapter 2. The Island of Seriphos. The chest bobbed and swayed on the endless expanse of the sea, tossed by the waves and carried by the currents. Danae held her son close, whispering prayers to the gods, her heart filled with both fear and hope. "Stay strong, my little Perseus," she murmured. "The gods will guide us." Days passed, and just as her strength began to fade, the chest was washed ashore on the island of Seriphos. A kind fisherman named Dictys discovered the chest, and upon opening it, found Danae and her young son. "By the gods!" Dictys exclaimed. "Who are you, my lady?" "I am Danae," she replied weakly. "This is my son, Perseus. We were cast out to sea. Please help us." Dictys, moved by their plight, took them in and cared for them as if they were his own family. "You are safe now," Dictys reassured her. "My home is yours." Dictys' wife, Callista, welcomed Danae and Perseus into their modest home with open arms. "Do not worry, dear," Callista said softly. "You are among friends now." Perseus grew up on Seriphos, strong and brave, under the watchful eye of his mother, the kind-hearted Dictys, and the gentle Callista. He spent his days helping Dictys with fishing, learning the ways of the sea, and listening to the stories of the gods and heroes that Callista would tell by the hearth at night. "One day, Perseus," Dictys said as they pulled in the fishing nets, "you will make your mark on this world. The gods have great plans for you, I can feel it." Perseus, though young, carried a sense of responsibility that belied his age. He loved his mother dearly and vowed to protect her, no matter the cost. Chapter 3. The Impossible Task. Years passed, and Perseus became known for his courage and his unyielding sense of justice. He was beloved by the people of Seriphos, who admired his strength and his kind heart. However, trouble began to brew when Polydectes, the king of Seriphos and brother of Dictys, took notice of Danae. Polydectes desired her for his own, but Danae refused his advances. "Why do you reject me, Danae?" Polydectes asked, his voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "I will not be yours, Polydectes," Danae replied firmly. "My heart belongs to my son and to the life we have made here." Polydectes, determined to rid himself of Perseus, devised a cunning plan. Polydectes announced a grand feast, declaring that he was to marry a noblewoman and that every guest must bring him a gift. Perseus, young and proud, had no gift to offer. "Perseus," Polydectes said slyly, "if you have no gift, then bring me the head of Medusa, the Gorgon." "The head of Medusa," Perseus repeated, his eyes widening. "That is an impossible task." Polydectes smirked. "If you are truly as brave as they say, Perseus, you will succeed." Perseus, though aware of the dangers, could not refuse the challenge. He vowed to bring back the head of Medusa, not for Polydectes, but to protect his mother and prove his own worth. "I will do it," Perseus declared, his voice steady. "I will bring back the head of Medusa." That evening, Danae confronted her son, her eyes filled with worry. "Perseus, you cannot do this," she pleaded. "Medusa is a monster. No one who has faced her has ever returned." "Mother," Perseus said gently, taking her hand, "I must do this. I cannot allow Polydectes to harm you. The gods will guide me." Danae sighed, tears brimming in her eyes. Be careful, my son. May the gods watch over you. Chapter 4. The Gifts of the Gods. Before setting out on his perilous journey, Perseus prayed to the gods for guidance. Athena, Hermes, he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. Grant me the strength to face Medusa and protect those I love.
His prayers were answered by Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods. Athena appeared before him, her eyes fierce and her voice filled with authority.
Perseus, she said, to face Medusa, you will need more than courage. You will need the gifts of the gods. Hermes stepped forward, a kind smile on his face. Take these winged sandals, Perseus, he said, handing them over. They will carry you across land and sea with the speed of the wind. Athena gifted him a polished shield, as reflective as a mirror. Do not look directly at Medusa, she warned. Use this shield to see her reflection, and you will be safe. The nymphs of the north provided Perseus with a magical satchel to safely contain Medusa's head and a helmet of invisibility, a gift from Hades himself. Thank you, Perseus said, his voice filled with gratitude. I will not fail. Before departing, Hermes placed a reassuring hand on Perseus's shoulder. Remember, young hero, he said, you are not alone. The gods are with you, and your bravery will light your way. Athena nodded, her gaze unwavering. Do not forget, Perseus, that the greatest strength comes from within. Trust in yourself as much as you trust in the gifts we have given you. Perseus bowed before the gods, feeling the weight of his task, but also the hope that their guidance had instilled in him. Chapter 5. The Lair of the Gorgons. Guided by Athena and Hermes, Perseus travelled to the edge of the world, where the Gorgons made their home. The land was bleak and barren, littered with statues of those who had dared to face Medusa and failed. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as if even the wind feared to disturb this cursed place. This is it, Perseus whispered to himself, his heart pounding. I must not fail. Athena's voice echoed in his mind. Remember, Perseus, use the shield. Trust in the gifts you have been given. Perseus approached the lair with caution, the shield held before him, reflecting the twisted landscape. He could hear the hissing of serpents, the sound growing louder as he drew closer. I see her, he muttered, his eyes fixed on the shield's reflection. Medusa lay before him, her eyes closed, her breathing deep. The lair was dark and oppressive, the air thick with the scent of decay. Perseus could feel his pulse quicken, his hands trembling slightly as he moved closer. The serpents that formed Medusa's hair twitched, sensing his presence. Now, Perseus thought, raising his sword, a gleaming blade gifted by Hermes. With a swift stroke, he severed Medusa's head from her body. The serpents hissed and writhed, and from the severed neck, a strange energy surged, giving birth to Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden warrior. The ground trembled, and Perseus quickly placed Medusa's head into the magical satchel. He glanced at Pegasus, the magnificent creature now standing before him, its wings outstretched. Thank you for your help, noble creature, Perseus whispered, placing a hand on Pegasus's neck. The horse neighed softly, as if understanding the hero's gratitude. Perseus took a moment to steady himself, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He looked around at the statues, once living beings who had fallen victim to Medusa's gaze. He bowed his head in silent respect for those who had come before him and failed. Chapter 6. The Escape. With Medusa's head safely secured in the magical satchel, Perseus turned to leave, but the Gorgons, Stheno and Euryale, awoke with a scream that shook the earth. "Medusa!" Stheno wailed, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who has done this?" Perseus, donning the helmet of invisibility, moved silently, his heart racing as he watched the Gorgons thrash in their rage. "Find him!" Euryale screeched. "He must not escape!"
The Gorgons' voices were filled with anguish and fury, their screams piercing the stillness of the night. They moved through the lair, their eyes scanning for any sign of the intruder. Perseus held his breath, each step calculated as he moved towards the exit. With the winged sandals, Perseus leapt into the air, soaring above the cursed land, leaving the furious Gorgons behind.
"Thank you, Athena. Thank you, Hermes," Perseus whispered as he flew, the relief overwhelming him. He knew his journey was far from over, but he had taken a great step towards fulfilling his promise. As Perseus soared over the darkened landscape, the wind rushing past his face, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The stars twinkled above, and for a moment he felt as if he was part of something much greater, a story woven by the gods themselves. The night sky stretched endlessly before him, the constellations shimmering like diamonds scattered across velvet. Pegasus flew beside him, the beat of the horse's wings rhythmic and calming. Perseus allowed himself a small smile, the sense of victory and hope filling his heart. Chapter 7. The Maiden in Chains. As Perseus flew across the sea, he spotted a figure below, chained to the rocks along the coast. It was Andromeda, a princess of incredible beauty, left as a sacrifice to a monstrous sea creature. Her eyes, filled with fear and sorrow, met his as he descended. "Who are you?" Andromeda called out, her voice trembling. "I am Perseus," he replied, landing beside her. "Why are you chained here?" "My people have sacrificed me to the sea monster," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It comes to devour me." Perseus looked out at the sea, where the creature's shadow loomed beneath the waves. "Not today," he said firmly. "I will save you." Drawing his sword, Perseus faced the sea monster, which rose from the depths with a roar that echoed across the cliffs. "Stay behind me, Andromeda!" Perseus shouted. The battle was fierce, but Perseus, with the strength of the gods and the courage that had guided him through Medusa's lair, struck the creature down. The sea churned violently, waves crashing against the rocks as Perseus fought the monster. Its massive jaws snapped at him, its eyes filled with a primal rage. Perseus moved with agility, his sword slashing through the air. The cries of the beast echoed across the coast, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth. Finally, with one final strike, Perseus drove his sword into the heart of the creature. It let out a final anguished roar before collapsing back into the sea, the waves swallowing its form. "It's over," he said, turning to Andromeda as her chains shattered. "You are free." Andromeda looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Perseus. I will go with you, wherever you go." Perseus smiled, helping her to her feet. "You are safe now, Andromeda. The gods have brought me here for a reason. Let us leave this place together." As they flew over the sea on Pegasus, Andromeda held tightly to Perseus, her heart pounding. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with admiration. "You are truly a hero, Perseus," she said softly. "I'm only doing what is right," Perseus replied, glancing back at her with a gentle smile. "The gods have blessed me, and I must use their gifts to help others." Chapter 8. The Return to Seriphos. With Andromeda by his side, Perseus returned to Seriphos, his heart set on confronting Polydectes. He found the king in the midst of another grand feast, surrounded by his court, his arrogance unchecked. When Perseus entered, the room fell silent, all eyes on the young hero and the mysterious satchel he carried. "Polydectes," Perseus called, his voice echoing through the hall. "You demanded the head of Medusa. Here it is." Polydectes laughed, his eyes narrowing. "You expect me to believe that? Show me, then." With that, Perseus drew the severed head from the satchel, and the eyes of Medusa, though lifeless, still held their terrible power. Polydectes and his loyal followers were turned to stone, their expressions frozen in shock and fear. "It is done," Perseus said, turning to Andromeda. "We can finally be at peace." The people of Seriphos cheered, their hearts filled with relief. Dictys stepped forward, his eyes moist with emotion. "Thank you, Perseus," Dictys said, embracing him. "You have saved us all." Andromeda looked around, seeing the joy and relief on the faces of the people. She turned to Perseus, her eyes shining. "You are a true hero, Perseus. You have saved not only me, but your people as well." Perseus smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "It is what must be done, Andromeda. The gods have given me strength, and I must use it for the good of others." Chapter 9. A New Beginning. With Polydectes gone, peace returned to Seriphos. Dictys was made king, and Perseus, with Andromeda, sailed back to Argos to reunite with his mother. "Mother!" Perseus called as he entered their home, his heart swelling with emotion. "Perseus!" Danae cried, rushing to embrace him. "You have returned, and who is this?" "This is Andromeda," Perseus said, smiling. "She is to be my wife." Danae looked at Andromeda, her eyes filled with warmth. "Welcome, my dear. You are now part of our family." Andromeda smiled, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Danae. I am honored to be here."
However, the prophecy still lingered in the back of his mind, the words of the oracle that had driven Acrisius to such cruel lengths. When Acrisius heard of Perseus's return, he fled, terrified of the prophecy's fulfillment.
"I do not wish to harm you, grandfather," Perseus said quietly to himself. "But fate cannot be escaped." During a great athletic contest, a discus thrown by Perseus, carried by an unfortunate gust of wind, struck Acrisius, fulfilling the oracle's words. Though it grieved Perseus, he understood that the will of the gods could not be denied. "It is done," Perseus said softly, looking up at the sky. "May you find peace, grandfather." Chapter 10. The Legacy of Perseus. Perseus became a just and wise ruler, his adventures and deeds spreading far and wide. He and Andromeda lived happily, their love a beacon of hope and resilience. They founded the city of Mycenae, which would grow to be one of the greatest cities of ancient Greece, a testament to Perseus's courage and determination. "We have done well, my love," Andromeda said, standing beside Perseus as they looked out over their thriving city. "Yes," Perseus replied, his arm around her. "And our story will live on, inspiring those who come after us." As the years passed, Perseus and Andromeda raised their children, teaching them the values of courage, kindness, and humility. They would sit by the hearth at night, recounting their adventures, and the children would listen with wide eyes, filled with wonder and admiration. "Father," one of his sons asked one evening, "will I be as brave as you one day?" Perseus smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Bravery comes from the heart, my son. As long as you act with kindness and courage, you'll be as brave as any hero." Andromeda added, her voice gentle, "Remember, my children, it is not just the strength of your arm that makes you a hero, but the strength of your heart. Always be just, always be kind." The children nodded, their eyes shining with determination. They knew that the legacy of their parents was not just one of strength, but of love and compassion. And so the journey of Perseus came to an end, not with sorrow, but with the promise of new beginnings. His story became a legend, passed down through generations, a tale of bravery, love, and the inescapable hands of fate. As the stars twinkled above, the constellation of Perseus shone brightly, a reminder of the hero's journey and the god's favor. Perseus and Andromeda's love and courage became a beacon, inspiring others to face their fears and overcome the challenges before them. Their city flourished, and their children grew to be wise and just leaders, continuing the legacy of their parents. The Fall of Icarus. Chapter 1. The Labyrinth and the Wings. The island of Crete, a place both beautiful and dangerous, lay under the reign of King Minos, a ruler both feared and admired for his strength. Deep within the heart of Minos's palace, beneath layers of twisted stone, existed the labyrinth, a maze so complex that no one had ever escaped its depths, and at its heart the monstrous Minotaur awaited any who dared enter. It was within these walls that Daedalus, a master inventor, and his son Icarus found themselves trapped, prisoners of their own designs. Daedalus had once enjoyed Minos's favor, celebrated for his creations, and trusted by the king for his ingenuity. But this trust soured the day Daedalus helped the Athenian hero Theseus escape the labyrinth, ensuring the Minotaur's demise. Furious at what he saw as betrayal, Minos turned on Daedalus, imprisoning him and Icarus in the very labyrinthine maze that had been his greatest feat. Days turned to weeks as Daedalus and Icarus wandered the cold, winding corridors, searching for a way out. The walls loomed around them, each pathway seemingly endless, each turn as bewildering as the last. Daedalus could see the fear in Icarus's eyes, his youthful spirit weighed down by the relentless isolation. It pained him to see his son's bright light dimmed by the dark, confining maze. "Father," Icarus whispered one evening, as they sat by a dim torch's light, "will we ever escape this place?" Daedalus placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder, his voice soft yet unwavering. "Yes, my boy, I swear it. The gods may test us, but they have not abandoned us, nor will I abandon you." With that promise, Daedalus's mind sparked with determination. He studied the walls, the floors, the ceilings, hoping for a weakness in the labyrinth. One day, as he watched the seagulls flying overhead through a narrow skylight, an idea began to take shape. He observed the way the birds soared, free of confinement, untouched by the boundaries that held him and his son. Inspiration struck him with the force of lightning, and he whispered, "Wings!" "What are you doing, Father?" Icarus asked, as he watched Daedalus begin collecting feathers from the ground, puzzlement overtaking his weariness. Daedalus looked up, his eyes gleaming with hope. "We will fly, my son. With these feathers I will fashion wings. We will escape this prison like the birds and leave this cursed maze far behind." The days that followed were filled with focused labor as Daedalus fashioned wooden frames, attaching feather after feather with wax he melted down. His hands worked with a skill and precision Icarus had never seen, guided by a desperate hope for freedom. Each evening, Daedalus would teach Icarus how to wear the wings, how to move his arms to simulate flight, and how to treat the wings with respect. One night, as the wings neared completion, Daedalus knelt by Icarus and took his hands, his gaze steady and serious. "Remember, my son, heed my words carefully," he said, his voice laden with both love and caution. "Do not fly too close to the sun, for the heat will melt the wax that binds these wings. And do not fly too low, or the sea's mist will weigh you down. Stay to the middle path. Only there lies safety." Icarus nodded solemnly, though his young face was alight with excitement and wonder. The stories his father had told him of the world beyond Crete filled his heart with longing, and he dreamed of skies that stretched endlessly, of cities beyond his imagining. Freedom was within reach, and the thought of flight thrilled him. Chapter 2. The Flight Begins. At dawn, as the sky softened with the first light, Daedalus and Icarus stood at the edge of a high cliff overlooking the sea. Their wings, secured with leather straps, gleamed in the early light. Below them, the waves crashed against the rocks, the scent of salt and freedom filling the air.
Daedalus took a deep breath, turning to his son with a mixture of pride and fear. "Are you ready, Icarus?" Icarus nodded, his face radiant. "Yes, father, I'm ready." With a final check to Icarus's wings, Daedalus gave him a solemn look. "Remember my words? Do not fly too high or too low. Trust the wind and respect the sky." "I will, father," Icarus replied, though his gaze was already drawn to the boundless horizon where the world awaited. Daedalus, bracing himself, extended his wings and stepped off the cliff's edge. The wind caught him, lifting him up, and for the first time he felt the rush of freedom as he rose into the air. Icarus watched in awe before following suit, spreading his wings and feeling the exhilarating lift of the wind. He laughed with joy, soaring upward, his spirit unburdened, feeling as if he could fly forever. The island of Crete grew smaller below them, and the labyrinthine maze became nothing more than a distant memory. The fear and confinement of their imprisonment faded, replaced by the thrill of the open sky. "Father, look at me!" Icarus called, his voice ringing with delight as he darted through the air, free as the birds. Daedalus looked back, his heart swelling with pride and a touch of worry. "Stay close, Icarus! Remember my warnings!" But Icarus's laughter filled the sky, his joy carrying him upward, the call of freedom overwhelming him. He watched as the sea sparkled beneath them, the islands like green jewels scattered on a blue tapestry, the sky stretching endlessly above. Daedalus, too, felt the thrill of escape, the realization that they were free. For the first time since their imprisonment, he allowed himself to breathe easily, savoring the taste of liberty.
Yet even as he soared, his gaze remained on his son, his heart gripped by an inexplicable fear. Chapter 3. The Temptation of the Sun. As they continued their flight, Icarus grew bolder, the thrill of the skies overtaking him. The sun shone bright above, and he felt its warmth on his face, a golden glow that seemed to welcome him, to beckon him higher. The allure of the heavens filled his mind, the earth below nothing but a distant blur. Higher he climbed, the vastness of the world opening up before him. He felt weightless, boundless, as if he could reach out and touch the sun itself. His father's words, warnings of distance and moderation, were lost in the wind that rushed past him. "Icarus, come down!" Daedalus's voice echoed faintly below, a note of panic threading through it as he watched his son rise ever higher. But Icarus did not hear him. His laughter echoed in the open sky, his eyes filled with wonder and abandon. He felt invincible, as if he had transcended the limits of mortality, as if he could touch the divine. The sun's rays grew hotter, their warmth intensifying with each passing moment, but Icarus was too enchanted to notice. The wax binding his wings softened under the sun's heat, loosening the feathers from their bindings. The sky was a golden expanse, and the world was far below, yet the danger above grew more real with each passing second. When the first feather drifted free, Icarus looked down in confusion, his hands reaching to stabilize his wings. But it was too late. The feathers scattered, falling away like leaves in a gust of wind, leaving only the bare frame of his wings. A look of terror crossed his face as he glanced back toward his father, who was desperately calling his name. "Father!" Icarus cried, but the realization had come too late. The sun, once inviting, now seemed to blaze with an indifferent fury. Icarus felt himself fall, his body plunging downward, his outstretched hands grasping at the empty air as he plummeted toward the sea. Chapter 4. The Fall. The joy and wonder of flight dissolved into a rush of fear as Icarus plummeted, the wind whipping past him, the sky spinning as he fell. The world that had felt so small now rushed up to meet him, the endless blue sea transforming into an unforgiving force. "Father!" he screamed, the terror thick in his voice, his once bright laughter replaced by cries of despair. The waves below seemed to reach for him, the churning waters hungry, indifferent to his pleas. Daedalus, helpless, could only watch in horror as his son disappeared into the vastness of the sea. He dove toward the water, his heart pounding, his wings beating furiously. But the sea had already swallowed Icarus, and his cries faded into the sound of the waves, leaving only silence in their wake. The sun continued its arc across the sky, as radiant and unfeeling as ever. Daedalus hovered above the waves, tears streaming down his face. His heart shattered, for he had lost the very light of his life. The sea, once a symbol of freedom, now seemed to mock him, indifferent to his grief. For a long time, Daedalus drifted, the emptiness within him as vast as the ocean below. He had taught his son to fly, but he could not protect him from the lure of the sun. He had been so close to freedom, yet he had lost what mattered most. Chapter 5. The Grief of Daedalus. Weary and heartbroken, Daedalus landed on a nearby island, his wings heavy with sorrow. He collapsed on the shore, the weight of his grief pressing him into the sand. The loss of his son was a void that threatened to consume him, the emptiness of the sky a bitter reminder of what had been taken from him. For days, Daedalus wandered the island, his mind lost in memories of Icarus's laughter, his bright spirit, his boundless curiosity. He looked up at the birds flying overhead, feeling both envy and bitterness as they soared without fear or restraint, while he remained grounded by his loss. On the shore, he gathered stones and built a shrine in his son's memory, stacking each rock carefully, his fingers trembling as he worked. When the shrine was complete, he carved Icarus's name into the largest stone, his heart heavy as he whispered, "Here lies Icarus, the boy who flew." With every feather that drifted past, with every whisper of the wind, Daedalus felt his son's presence. His loss would never fade, but he realized that Icarus's spirit would live on. He had tasted freedom, even if only briefly, and that courage, that audacity, was something Daedalus would carry with him always. Daedalus took to the sky once more, his son's memory a constant companion. And as he shared his tale with others, Icarus's story became a lesson, a reminder of the beauty and danger of ambition. The story of Icarus is a tale of courage, ambition, and the delicate balance between aspiration and caution. His name lives on in legend, inspiring those who dream and warning those who dare, reminding them that even the brightest flights can carry the risk of a fall. Chapter 6. A Father's Legacy. Daedalus, carrying the memory of Icarus, continued his journey across the islands of the Aegean Sea. He wandered from shore to shore, seeking solace in the sound of the waves and the vastness of the sky. Yet every day he felt the weight of his son's absence. The world felt emptier without Icarus's laughter, his spirit that had once soared beside him. Everywhere he went, Daedalus spoke of Icarus, sharing the story of his flight and fall. Villagers gathered around, listening with rapt attention as Daedalus described the boy who dared to fly higher than anyone had before, his courage and his joy. To Daedalus, Icarus's story was more than a tale of loss. It was a story of ambition, of a desire to reach beyond what seemed possible. And in sharing it, he felt a part of his son's spirit alive in each listener, in each wide-eyed child who dreamed of soaring to new heights. One day, Daedalus arrived on the island of Sicily, where he found himself welcomed by King Cocculus. Cocculus had heard of Daedalus's genius and offered him refuge, inviting him to stay as a guest in his palace. Daedalus accepted, grateful for a place to rest, but he was no longer the celebrated inventor who had created marvels for the kings of Greece. Instead, he was a man haunted by loss, driven by a need to create not for glory, but as a tribute to his son. In the workshops of Sicily, Daedalus crafted intricate statues, each one reaching skyward, hands outstretched as though yearning to touch the heavens. He poured his heart into his work, building creations that mirrored Icarus's dream of flight. These statues, cast in bronze and stone, became symbols of both triumph and caution, each one bearing the reminder of Icarus's daring spirit and his tragic fall. As Daedalus worked, he found himself mentoring young artisans and inventors, teaching them not only his craft, but the importance of humility. He would tell them, remember the story of Icarus, reach for the stars, but do not forget to respect the forces that lie beyond your control. Ambition is a gift, but it must be tempered with wisdom. The people of Sicily began to see Daedalus not merely as a skilled inventor, but as a teacher of profound lessons. His story of Icarus became a parable, a tale of human aspiration and the importance of balance. Young artisans found inspiration in Icarus's daring, but they heeded Daedalus's words, honoring both the beauty of his son's flight and the caution it demanded. Chapter 7. The Arrival of King Minos. But Daedalus's peace in Sicily was not to last. Word of his refuge soon reached the ears of King Minos, who still burned with anger over Daedalus's betrayal and escape. Determined to bring the inventor back to Crete, Minos devised a cunning plan. He sent a messenger to Sicily, bearing a challenge that he knew only Daedalus could solve. Minos's challenge was simple, a seashell threaded through with a delicate thread. It was an impossible task for most, yet Daedalus, with his ingenuity, quickly devised a solution. Using a small ant to pull the thread through the winding shell, he solved the riddle, unaware that by doing so, he had revealed his presence to the vengeful king. Days later, Minos himself arrived in Sicily, accompanied by a fleet of ships and soldiers. He demanded that Cocculus hand over Daedalus, threatening war if he refused. King Cocculus, fearing for his people, agreed, but his daughters, who had come to love and respect Daedalus, devised a plan to protect him. Under the guise of preparing a bath for Minos, Cocculus's daughters tricked the king, ensuring that he would never leave Sicily alive. And with Minos's death, Daedalus was finally free from his past, no longer pursued, no longer hunted. The threat that had loomed over him since his escape from Crete was lifted, and he could now live without fear. But the victory was bittersweet. Daedalus had gained his freedom, yet he was still bound by the memory of Icarus, by the loss that no amount of peace could mend. He felt the absence of his son as acutely as ever, and though he was free from Minos, he knew that Icarus's spirit would always be with him, a reminder of both the beauty and the tragedy of ambition. Chapter 8. The Shrine to Icarus. In his later years, Daedalus returned to the island where Icarus had fallen, the place where he had built the first shrine to his son. The sea was calm, the waves gentle as they lapped against the shore, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had once raged within him. Here, in the quiet solitude, Daedalus found a sense of peace, the knowledge that he had done all he could to honor his son's memory. He knelt before the shrine, his hands tracing the stones he had placed so many years ago. The grief that had once consumed him had softened, becoming a part of him, a reminder of the love he had shared with Icarus. "Fly high, my son," he whispered, his voice carrying on the wind. "Your spirit is free, beyond the bounds of the sky." Villagers from nearby islands came to pay their respects, leaving offerings of feathers and laurel branches at the shrine. Children would listen to the tale of Icarus and Daedalus, their eyes wide with wonder, as they imagined the boy who had soared higher than anyone before him. For them, Icarus was not just a figure of tragedy, but a hero, a boy who had dared to dream. The shrine became a place of pilgrimage, a sanctuary for those who sought inspiration, a reminder of the courage it took to chase one's dreams and the wisdom needed to temper ambition. Daedalus's story became intertwined with Icarus, their names forever linked in a tale of both triumph and loss. Chapter 9. The Ending. In the twilight of his life, Daedalus stood at the edge of the shore, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The years had softened him, and his spirit had found a semblance of peace. He had lived a life filled with marvels and inventions, with both praise and regret. Yet his greatest creation, the wings that had carried him and Icarus to freedom, remained his most bitter-sweet accomplishment. As he watched the sun dip below the horizon, the sky ablaze with hues of gold and crimson, Daedalus felt the presence of his son. The colors of the sunset reminded him of Icarus's wings, of the joy that had shone in his eyes as they took flight. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun, a reminder of the light Icarus had brought into his life. Though he had shared his son's story far and wide, Daedalus knew that Icarus's legacy would live on not only in the words of others, but in the courage of those who dared to reach beyond themselves, who sought to touch the sky even as they respected the forces that lay beyond their grasp. His son's story had become a testament to the beauty and peril of human aspiration. And so, as the stars began to dot the sky, Daedalus whispered a final farewell, his heart filled with both sorrow and pride. He had built statues, crafted monuments, shared tales, but in the end he knew that Icarus's true legacy lay in the hearts of those who remembered his daring, his joy, and his tragic fall. "Rest well, Icarus," he murmured. "Your spirit lives on." As Daedalus spread his wings one last time, he lifted into the sky, his heart unburdened, carrying with him the memory of his son. He soared across the calm, endless sea, the stars above a silent witness, and in that moment he felt a connection to Icarus, a sense that they were not truly separated. In the hearts of those who heard their story, Icarus and Daedalus would live on, a legend of ambition, of love, and of the delicate balance between courage and caution. And though Daedalus's life would one day come to an end, the tale of the father and son who dared to fly would echo across time, a reminder of humanity's eternal dream to soar. The end. Myth of Atalanta. Chapter 1. The Abandoned Child. In the heart of Arcadia, a land of untamed forests and wild mountains, a baby girl was born to King Iasus and Queen Clymene. She was beautiful, her cries like the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves, but she was also unwanted. The king had hoped for a son, a strong heir, to continue his lineage. When he looked upon his newborn daughter, disappointment clouded his heart. "A daughter," he said, his voice filled with disdain. "What use is a daughter to me?" The queen, her eyes filled with sadness, tried to cradle the child, but the king's decree was final. He ordered the infant to be taken into the wilderness and left there to perish. The servants obeyed, carrying the baby deep into the forest, laying her gently upon a bed of leaves. The forest was dark and thick, filled with dangers that would easily consume an abandoned child. Yet fate had other plans for the infant. As the sun set and the cold night descended, a she-bear, her instincts drawn to the cries of the baby, approached. Instead of harm, the bear offered warmth and nourishment, adopting the child as her own. The baby grew among the animals, learning the ways of the forest. She was swift, fierce, and untamed, a child of both man and beast. The nymphs of the woods, enchanted by her resilience, also took her under their care. They named her Atalanta, and she thrived under their guidance, becoming more than any human or creature had imagined. She learned the language of the forest, the songs of the birds, and the ways of survival. Her spirit was as wild as the wind that swept through the Arcadian trees, her laughter echoing through the woods as she played with the nymphs and raced with the deer. Atalanta grew up with a deep bond to the natural world. The forest was her playground, her sanctuary. She learned how to climb the tallest trees, her bare feet agile and sure as she leaped from branch to branch. She would sit high in the canopy, watching the world below, her keen eyes spotting the slightest movement. She knew where the wild berries grew sweetest, where the river ran clearest, and where the dens of the foxes lay hidden. Her senses were sharp, her instincts keen, and her heart free. Chapter 2. The Huntress of Arcadia. Years passed, and Atalanta grew into a young woman as beautiful as she was fierce. Her golden hair flowed like sunlight, and her eyes held the wild spirit of the forest. She could run faster than any deer, her feet barely touching the earth as she raced through the woods. Her skill with a bow was unmatched, each arrow she loosed, finding its mark with precision. She had a deep understanding of the balance of nature, knowing when to hunt and when to let the creatures of the forest be. She had no desire to live among men. The forest was her home, the animals her companions. She moved through the trees like a shadow, her presence almost ethereal. The stories of her beauty and her prowess spread across Arcadia, and soon hunters and warriors came seeking her, hoping to witness her legendary skill. One day, as she hunted in the depths of the forest, she heard the sound of a horn, a call for help. Atalanta moved towards the sound, her bow in hand, her heart pounding. She came upon a group of hunters surrounded by a massive boar, its tusks sharp as daggers, its eyes filled with fury. The men, terrified, tried to fend off the beast, but it was too powerful. Without hesitation, Atalanta notched an arrow, her gaze steady as she took aim. The arrow flew through the air, striking the boar in the heart. The beast fell, its roar fading into silence. The hunters looked at her in awe. One of them, a young man named Meleager, stepped forward, his eyes filled with admiration. "Who are you, maiden of the forest?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I am Atalanta," she replied, her voice as steady as her aim. "I belong to no one but the forest." Meleager, captivated by her bravery and beauty, bowed to her. "You have saved our lives, Atalanta. You are truly blessed by the gods." Atalanta nodded, her eyes meeting his for a moment, before she turned and disappeared back into the forest, her heart untouched by the admiration of men. She preferred the solitude of the woods, the companionship of creatures who demanded nothing of her. Her life was simple, free from the expectations and desires of men. Atalanta's days were filled with the rhythm of the forest. She would rise with the dawn, the mist still clinging to the earth, and run through the woods, her feet carrying her over roots and stones without falter. She hunted for her food, her arrows swift and sure, and she shared her spoils with the animals that had once been her family. The nymphs watched over her, their laughter like music in the breeze, and she felt a deep sense of belonging. She had no need for the world of men, with their greed and their ambitions. Chapter 3. The Caledonian Boar Hunt. Word of Atalanta's prowess spread far and wide, reaching even the ears of King Oeneus of Caledon. The king had angered Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, by neglecting to honor her with offerings. In her wrath, Artemis sent a monstrous boar to ravage the kingdom, destroying crops and striking fear into the hearts of the people. Desperate, King Oeneus called upon the greatest heroes of Greece to join in a hunt to slay the boar. Among those who answered the call was Meleager, the king's son. He thought of Atalanta, the maiden who had saved his life in the forest, and he knew she was the key to their success. Meleager journeyed to Arcadia, finding Atalanta in her forest sanctuary. He bowed before her, his eyes filled with earnestness. "Atalanta, the people of Caledon need your help," he said. "A monstrous boar ravages our land. We need your skill, your courage." Atalanta hesitated, her heart torn. She had no desire to leave her forest, but the plea in Melega's eyes moved her. She saw not just fear, but hope, a hope that she could not ignore. "Very well," she said finally. "I will join you. But know this, I do this for the hunt, not for glory." Melega smiled, relief washing over him. "That is all we ask, Atalanta. Your courage is more than we could hope for." The heroes gathered in Caledon, their faces grim as they prepared for the hunt. Many of them scoffed at the sight of Atalanta, a woman among warriors. They doubted her strength, her skill, and her place among them. But Melega stood by her side, his respect for her unwavering. "Do not underestimate her," he warned. "Atalanta is no ordinary woman. She is blessed by the gods."
The other heroes murmured among themselves, but Melega's words held weight. They had seen enough of the capriciousness of the gods to understand that those blessed by them often possessed abilities beyond comprehension. They watched Atalanta, some with doubt, others with curiosity, as they prepared for the great hunt. The night before the hunt, the camp was filled with tension. The men spoke in hushed tones, sharpening their weapons and preparing their gear. Atalanta sat apart, her bow resting across her knees, her eyes closed as she listened to the sounds of the forest. Melega approached her, his expression thoughtful.
"Are you afraid?" he asked, his voice low. Atalanta opened her eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. "Fear is natural, Melega, but it does not rule me. The forest has taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to face it."
Melega nodded, respect deepening in his gaze. "I am glad you are here, Atalanta. I do not think we could do this without you." Atalanta looked at him, her eyes steady. "The boar is a creature of Artemis. It deserves our respect even as we hunt it. Remember that, Melega. We do this not for glory, but to restore balance."
Melega smiled. "You speak with wisdom, Atalanta. I will remember." Chapter 4. The Boar and the Bloodshed. The day of the hunt dawned, the sky overcast and the air thick with tension. The heroes spread out through the forest, their weapons at the ready. Atalanta moved with ease, her steps silent, her senses attuned to every sound, every movement. She felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the whispers of the wind guiding her. Suddenly the ground shook, and a roar echoed through the forest. The boar burst from the underbrush, its massive form charging towards the hunters. The men scattered, their shouts mingling with the beast's deafening roars.
Atalanta stood her ground, her bow raised. She took a deep breath, her focus narrowing to the boar before her. She released the arrow, the string singing as the arrow flew true, striking the boar's flank. The beast roared in pain, its eyes blazing with fury. It turned towards Atalanta, its tusks gleaming. Melega, seeing the danger, rushed forward, his spear raised. With a powerful thrust, he drove the spear into the boar's heart, the beast collapsing with a final, earth-shaking roar.
The forest fell silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of the hunters. Melega turned to Atalanta, his eyes filled with gratitude. "The kill is yours, Atalanta," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "It was your arrow that brought the beast down." The other hunters murmured among themselves, their earlier doubts replaced by respect. Atalanta nodded, her expression calm, though her heart raced with the thrill of the hunt. She had faced the monstrous boar without fear, her skill and courage undeniable. But not all were pleased. Meleager's uncles, jealous and resentful of the honor given to a woman, spoke out against her. "This is an insult," one of them spat. "A woman does not deserve such glory."
Meleager's eyes darkened, anger flaring within him. "Atalanta has earned this honor. She is braver than any of you." The argument escalated, the tension breaking into violence. Meleager, in his rage, struck down his uncles, their lives ended by his hand. The joy of the hunt was overshadowed by bloodshed, the victory tainted by death. The other hunters looked on in shock, their triumph over the boar now marred by the weight of human folly. Atalanta watched in silence, her heart heavy. She had not sought this conflict, and yet here it was, a reminder of the darkness that often lay in the hearts of men. She turned away, feeling the pull of the forest, the need to return to the peace she had known.
Chapter 5. The Race for Atalanta's Hand. After the hunt, Atalanta returned to Arcadia, her heart heavy. She had never sought glory, nor the admiration of men, yet now her name was known throughout Greece. Suitors came from far and wide, each hoping to win her hand in marriage. But Atalanta had no desire to marry. She valued her freedom above all else, and had no intention of being bound to any man. To deter her suitors, she set a condition. She would only marry the man who could defeat her in a foot race. Those who lost would pay with their lives.
Many thought they could outrun her, confident in their strength and speed. But Atalanta was swift as the wind, her feet barely touching the ground as she raced. One by one her suitors fell, unable to match her speed, their fates sealed by their arrogance.
Among the suitors was a young man named Hippomenes. Unlike the others, he did not see Atalanta as a prize to be won. He admired her spirit, her independence, and he longed to be worthy of her. Knowing he could not defeat her on his own, he prayed to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, for help. Aphrodite, moved by his sincerity, gave him 3 golden apples, each one more beautiful than the last. "Use these wisely," she said, her voice gentle. "They will help you win her heart." The day of the race arrived, and Hippomenes stood at the starting line, the golden apples hidden beneath his cloak. Atalanta looked at him, her eyes assessing. There was something different about him, a determination that set him apart from the others. Chapter 6. The Golden Apples. The race began, and Atalanta surged ahead, her feet flying over the earth. Hippomenes ran after her, his heart pounding, knowing he could not match her speed. As Atalanta pulled further ahead, he took one of the golden apples and threw it before her. The apple gleamed in the sunlight, its beauty catching Atalanta's eye. She hesitated, her curiosity piqued, and she bent to pick it up. Hippomenes used the moment to gain ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But Atalanta quickly recovered, her speed unmatched as she overtook him once more. Hippomenes, desperate, threw the second apple. Again Atalanta paused, the allure of the golden fruit too strong to resist. Hippomenes pushed himself harder, his legs burning, his lungs on fire. He knew he had only one chance left. As Atalanta closed the distance between them, he threw the final apple, its radiance surpassing the others. Atalanta, her heart torn, slowed once more, her eyes drawn to the golden apple. Hippomenes, with every ounce of strength he had left, crossed the finish line just ahead of her. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Atalanta stood still, her eyes on Hippomenes. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time she felt her heart soften. Chapter 7. The Marriage and the Curse. True to her word, Atalanta agreed to marry Hippomenes. Though she had never desired marriage, she found herself drawn to his determination, his willingness to fight for her without trying to control her. They were wed, and for a time they were happy, their love a partnership built on respect and admiration. But happiness is often fleeting, especially when the gods are involved. Hippomenes, in his joy, forgot to honor Aphrodite, the goddess who had aided him. Offended by his ingratitude, Aphrodite cursed the couple. One day, as they traveled through a sacred temple, the curse took hold. Overcome by a sudden, uncontrollable desire, they defiled the temple, their actions driven by the goddess's wrath. The gods, enraged by the desecration, transformed them into lions, condemning them to roam the wilderness, forever apart from the world of men. Chapter 8. The Legacy of Atalanta. Atalanta's story became one of caution and inspiration. She was a woman who defied the expectations of her time, who refused to be less than what she was capable of. She was swift, fierce, and free, a symbol of independence and strength. Even as a lion, Atalanta retained her spirit. She roamed the wilds of Greece with Hippomenes, their roars echoing through the mountains and valleys. They were a reminder of the power of love, of the consequences of pride, and of the strength it takes to remain true to oneself. The nymphs of the forest spoke of Atalanta with reverence, telling her story to those who would listen. They spoke of her courage, her skill, and her unwillingness to conform to the will of others. They spoke of her love for the hunt, her connection to the natural world, and her fierce independence. And so the legend of Atalanta lived on, inspiring those who heard it to be brave, to be strong, and to never let go of their dreams. She was more than a hero. She was a force of nature, untamed and unbroken.
The people of Arcadia would look to the mountains and forests, imagining the lions that roamed there. They would tell their children of the huntress who ran faster than the wind, of the woman who refused to be owned, and of the love that defied even the gods. Atalanta's name was whispered with awe and respect, her legacy carved into the very fabric of the wilderness she had called home.
And thus ends the tale of Atalanta, a tale of resilience, love, and the indomitable spirit of a woman who lived by her own rules. The end.